I watched a report on Al Jazeera last night, which was covering the 25th anniversary of the Rwandan Genocide, or rather the start of the Rwandan Genocide in April 1994. 25 years, quarter of a century. It's a fair passage of time, but it's still way too close for comfort, still well within recent memory. What I find astonishing about Rwanda is the depth, the strength of forgiveness that so many Rwandans have. It's humbling. I mean, if people in a country that has seen the scale of slaughter, the nightmare that Rwanda saw that year, can bring themselves to forgive, it's astonishing. I'm not making any sort of moral judgment on that one way or the other. I don't know if I could do it. In fact, I'm pretty sure I couldn't, to be quite honest. If my entire family had been slaughtered, could I forgive the people who done it? I don't know. So they interviewed a woman whose family remains were basically in a coffin, and there was like dozens and dozens of these coffins stacked up um, in this underground crypt. In that one district, 45,000 people have been slaughtered. One district. Um, the report also showed a church, and you could still see the bullet holes, the shrapnel holes in the ceiling. Um, and like Cambodia, so many were killed that you just see literally piles of skulls and bones. It's chilling, absolutely chilling. Anyway, I decided to read a bit more of a book I've got. This is An Ordinary Man, which is a biography of Paul Rusesabagina. He was portrayed in the film Hotel Rwanda by Don Cheadle, and this is a really insightful book. It's very his actual style of writing. He's a good writer anyway. Although he's not a writer by background, he was a hotel manager, and the film is based on this man who took great personal risk to shield hundreds of Tutsi and moderate Hutu refugees, and he's been called the Schindler of Africa because he was a Hutu of moderate political influence, who, like I say, took great personal risk. But anyway, he's I've got to the point now where, with the beginning of the genocide in April 1994, which was, of course, triggered by the assassinations or the deaths of both the presidents of Burundi and Rwanda, Rwanda's President Juvenal Habyarimana, who had ruled Rwanda at that point for 20 years. So this was a huge blow for many Rwandans, a young population. He was the only leader that they'd known. Now, I may read a bit of this out because it is really quite striking regarding the UN's utter lack of action. So I'll just read a bit of this out. Bear with me. Um, let's see. A force of 2,700 United Nations peacekeeping soldiers were already inside the country, but they were ill-equipped and under strict orders from UN headquarters not to fire their weapons except in defence of themselves. "Do not fire unless fired upon" was the mantra. The recent US disaster in Somalia, in which 18 Army Rangers had been killed by street mobs, which of course was such subject of Black Hawk Down, had made the idea of African peacekeeping a poisonous concept in the minds of many diplomats in the American State Department and the UN Security Council. They saw nothing to gain from it and everything to lose. The leader of the UN troops in Rwanda was a lantern-jawed general from Canada named Romeo Dallaire. None of us knew it at the time, but he was handcuffed by lack of resolve from his bosses in New York City. He and his troops also had no idea what they had gotten into. In terms of background intelligence, Dallaire had only a map of Rwanda ripped out of a tourist guide and an encyclopedia entry hastily photocopied from the Montreal Public Library, but he got a quick and nasty education about Rwanda after an informant from a high level of the Hutu power movement sneaked over to the UN compound one night that winter. This man, later nicknamed Jean Pierre, came with a story that would have seemed incredible to anyone who hadn't been watching the frog slowly boiling for the last year. I assume that winter was winter 1993, the year before. up to 1,700 inter-Hamwe members. The inter-Hamwe was the Hutu militias. Had apparently been trained to act as an extermination squad against civilians. There were secret caches of arms scattered all over Kigali, stores of Kalashnikov's ammunition, and many more of those damnably cheap grenades to supplement the militia's arsenal, which consisted largely of traditional Rwandan weapons like spears and clubs. Jean Pierre himself had been ordered to register all Tutsis and opposition elements living in a certain area, and he strongly suspected it was being prepared as a death list. Those who had planned the genocide expected to be some sort of half-hearted resistance from the UN at the beginning, said Jean Pierre, and there was a strategy to cope with this, a brutal attack aimed at Belgian soldiers serving with the UN mission. It was thought that the Europeans would have no stomach for taking casualties and quickly withdraw their troops, leaving Rwandans to shape their own destiny. In disregard of his UN superior in Rwanda, Jacques Roger Bo Dallaire had not sat on this news. On January 11, 1994, he had sent a cable to his superiors in New York informing them of his intention to raid the arms cache. It would have put only the tiniest dent in the amount of sharp-edged killing weapons being stockpiled around Rwanda, but I believe it would have inflicted a devastating psychological blow to the architects of the genocide. They would have seen that somebody was paying attention and that the genocidal actions would be met with reprisals. But the response Dallaire received from his UN boss is nicely summarized just about every cowardly, bureaucratic, and incompetent step this organization was to make in a nation on the brink of mass murder. Stockpiling of weapons may have violated the peace accords, Dallaire was told, but going after them was beyond the mandate of the UN. He was instead encouraged to take his concerns to a man who surely would be the last one in the world to care, President Habyarimana, a man who would later, of course, be assassinated. And that was the rumors around exactly what happened there. It's a major conspiracy theory, definitely triggered the genocide. The UN official who directed General Dallaire to take this deferential action was the Chief of Peacekeeping, Kofi Annan, who later became Secretary General, of course. Jean Pierre's warnings were effectively brushed off. Nobody from the UN had heard from him again. So there you have Dallaire, who tried to do the right thing, but he had his hands tied. Annan did later express regret for his role in preventing and not preventing the genocide. The Secretary General at the time was Boutros Ali. Um, it's easy to see why the UN didn't have an appetite, or the American State Department didn't have an appetite after what happened to their troops in Somalia, and that was horrible. But there were very obvious warning signs going on in Rwanda, and it's chilling just how fast things exploded. I mean, 800,000 people slaughtered in about 100 days. It's unparalleled in modern history, um, except for the Cambodian genocide. I mean, in terms of so many people killed over a short period of time. Of course, there's been other atrocities, there's been other wars and genocides, but I don't think in my lifetime anything on such a devastating scale over such a short period of time. But like I say, 25 years now, and there has been genocide since then, Darfur um, and elsewhere. And what I find striking about Rwanda, it's a very small country, you know, very small country, and I think the ghosts of Rwanda are going to be around for a long time. I can't see how. I think something like that is going to have a psychological effect on a small country for a very long time, very, very long time. Probably everyone who's alive today in Rwanda, that will be with them for the rest of their lives. At least those who were alive during the genocide. I mean, the strength of those who can forgive people who committed mass slaughter is incredible. And the genocidaires themselves, they've begged for forgiveness. There's been other examples in history, like in China's Cultural Revolution. I've heard of former Red Guards seeking forgiveness from the people they killed, the relatives of those they killed. And yet Chairman Mao was never brought to justice. That's a big difference with China and Cambodia, incidentally. Khmer Rouge leaders were brought to justice in China. Mao never was. The Gang of Four was sort of scapegoated, but Mao was still venerated, which is absolutely stomach turning. But anyway, Rwanda. Um, if you see the film Hotel Rwanda, incidentally, General Dallaire is played by Nick Nolte. Very strong performance. It's a very powerful film all around, and it's one of only two feature films that I could think of that were made about the Rwanda genocide. The other one is one I haven't seen, Shooting Dogs, starring the late um, hmm, brain freeze there, prominent British actor. He died 2 years ago. Um, John Hurt, yeah. So if I get a chance to see that one, I will. But Hotel Rwanda, 2005 film, very powerful. 25 years on. Rwanda, it's not all bad news in Rwanda. It's actually the world leader in terms of gender proportion in parliament. No other country apparently has more female representation in parliament. So, of all the negative connotations that come with Rwanda, that's one positive one. Um, I don't think Rwanda will ever see a genocide on that scale again. I think the ghost is too strong. But there is a lot of people say that Paul Kagame is a dictator. There is tensions there. It's definitely, I don't think the reconciliation's fully come full circle, particularly as a lot of the refugees then went to the Democratic Republic of Congo. So, if that issue continues to go on, that part of the world's, I mean, the Rwanda genocide was in recent history, but what's often forgotten is the two Burundi genocides, 1972 and 1993. So it isn't just Rwanda where there is Hutu Tutsi hatred. It is worth mentioning, though, that the millions who have been killed and wounded in those genocides, I mean, that's arguably the most graphic example of racism in modern history. Racism insofar as Tutsis were seen to be taller, they were seen to their nose was a different shape. There was actually physical features that were said to be different between Tutsis and Hutus. And the Belgians didn't exactly help matters because the Tutsis were seen as favoured by the Belgian colonialists. Anyway, any Rwandan viewers would like to know your view. I can't imagine losing my entire family that way. But I just hope Rwanda can move forward and yeah, let's hope nothing like that ever happens again on that sort of scale.